coming up on Lawmakers. State School Superintendent Cox comes under fire for proposed changes to the state's curriculum. Public debate over tort reform and damage award caps heats up. And the House passes a bill that maintains utilities' right of eminent domain. Those stories and more are coming up next.
Live from Atlanta, this is Lawmakers for Thursday, January 29th. Here are your hosts, Gerald Bryant and Nwandi Lawson.
Good evening, everyone. Also on tonight's broadcast, the AARP joins with Georgia Watch to bring victims of malpractice to the tort reform debate.
And Lieutenant Governor Mark Taylor talks with students about their opinion of proposed changes to the Hope Scholarship. But our first story tonight, controversy over proposed curriculum changes.
State School Superintendent Cox faced reporters today to address what she called the misconceptions about the Department of Education's proposed biology curriculum. That curriculum mentions biological changes through time, but does not use the word evolution.
That is a buzzword that causes a lot of negative reaction. It also causes people to jump to conclusions. And what we're seeing today is kind of the opposite of what we expected, honestly, was that by putting the word in there, we thought people would jump to conclusion and think, okay, we're going to be teaching, the monkeys to man sort of thing, which is not what happens in a modern biology classroom across the state of Georgia. So there's so many misconceptions, and we didn't want people to jump to those conclusions.
School Superintendent Cox said that the concepts such as Darwinism, adaptation, natural selection are all interwoven into the biology curriculum and stressed that this is a work in progress, not a final product.
The proposal all along was that we would set forth a draft document that would lay on the table for commentary by the people of Georgia for the next 90 days. We are in this process right now. And I, as an elected superintendent of the state of Georgia, will listen to that feedback. Our teacher teams will take that feedback. Our expert advisory boards will, after this period is over, take a look at all that and make recommendations. And ultimately, I think the people of Georgia will tell us what they want in that biology curriculum.
Stephen Pruitt, a science curriculum specialist for the Department of Education, defended the scientific accuracy of the proposed biology curriculum, and Superintendent Cox said the word evolution was not used because, in part, of the emotional nature of the issue.
The average person in the state of Georgia will hear that word and think of something that's not really what we're doing in our biology classrooms. So, that's why there's such emotion about it as well as confusion about it.
Whether we call it change over time or whether we call it evolution, I don't think that we need to get into the fact that this curriculum is saying that word is banned in Georgia, but that also that our kids are going to be guaranteed a quality science education.
The curriculum doesn't necessarily ban the use of that word. So if that's the point. We wanted people to actually read the document and not get caught up in a single word or a single terminology.
Superintendent Cox repeatedly recommended that people read the draft of the proposed biology curriculum. If you would like to do that, you can go to the State Department of Education website. That's at www.gadoe.org.
Well, criticism of the proposed biology curriculum came from several quarters. In the state Senate today, Senator Connie Stokes called it a slippery slope, and Lieutenant Governor Mark Taylor had these cautionary words.
Members of the Senate, a major reworking of Georgia's curriculum has been proposed. The curriculum has been placed on the web by Superintendent of Schools Cox for your review and the review of this state before it goes into effect. I would urge you, as the people who will be held accountable this fall for that curriculum, to insist that educators in your district who you trust review this proposed curriculum.
In my opinion, it's a slippery slope. And it's a slope that we do not want to start to going down. I really just ask the superintendent to reconsider this. In my opinion, this is not about the debate as to what you believe. Do you believe in creation or do you believe in the theory of evolution? This is a much, much bigger issue than what we believe personally, because it puts our kids at a disadvantage.
The Georgia Association of Educators said they'd been receiving a lot of reaction from teachers. GAE spokesperson Jocelyn Whitfield said the concerns were twofold.
We also spoke with Ms. Whitfield about two of the Governor Perdue's education bills that passed the Senate Education Committee yesterday. Senate Bill 428, a school discipline bill, could result in teachers being assigned to be attendance officers.
Our objection is to the position that the governor's taken of allowing local boards of education to appoint one or more school employees to serve as an attendance officer, and then also including in that the duties of taking a child into custody to deliver them to school or to a parent or to a probation officer. And that's not a position that any certified employee really wants to be placed in. Certainly it's important that children be in school, and that's their aim, is to have them there to teach them, but not to be the one to transport the children to school. And it puts them in a difficult situation. And our concern is local boards can already hire attendance officers, and they should just be able to continue to do that rather than designate a certified employee to serve in that position.
Let's move on to Senate Bill 429. Dr. Williams had some much larger objections to a couple of the provisions of that bill. One in particular is that in some classroom situations, smaller classroom is not going to be implemented, and the governor's floor leader said because of budgetary considerations, until next year, and Dr. Williams was very concerned about that, expressed that concern.
Our concern is the same this year as it was last year in his proposal to delay the class size implementation. Is that the children it's been proven over and over through research that smaller class sizes improve student achievement, and to allow for the school systems to increase class sizes only hurts student achievement, especially in a time that we're trying to adhere to state mandates and federal mandates. And the concern is too that even if they delay it this year, they're trying to implement into law a system-wide averaging, so that means that school systems can count and you know how averaging can work. We find it very problematic because the school systems can count almost every position and use that to average out the number of students to come up with what the class size average is. And we would rather see to maintain a maximum class size on a class-by-class basis so that every student is guaranteed the opportunity for individualized attention.
I also talked with Senator Preston Smith about the governor's education bill. He said Senate Bill 428 would put teeth into the current law.
Most notably, if a student is disruptive or violent or even disrespectful in the classroom, they can lose certain privileges, and one of those is the ability to drive a car in the state of Georgia. The driver's license privilege is one that's licensed by the state and one that's subject to being revoked or denied on application, and that's one of the tools that's being given to the schools to be used, both in terms of enforcing truancy and also enforcing discipline in the classroom.
There's another provision, too, that I think a lot of people might be interested in, and that is the fact that if you do not keep your child in school, that is actually a state law, and it is a misdemeanor offense for a parent who fails to see that their child attends school regularly. So there's kind of a little beefing up of that provision as well as far as fines and judgments are concerned.
Well, that's exactly right. I think the intention is to encourage families to get these students back in school. You know, we're in a new era of accountability, some of which is driven by federal law and President Bush's No Child Left Behind provisions, but the teachers that are ultimately held responsible for that truancy aren't the ones that have the ability to go and wake the child up and bring them to school. And so current state law provides for a misdemeanor criminal offense if a parent does not get the child in school and keep them during the school year present and attending in class. But the law is not really being enforced, and so there's some teeth added to that law as well. One of the provisions is that if a student is truant from school, then the parent will be held responsible for a criminal misdemeanor with a fine of minimum $25 and up to $100. It also includes a possibility of 30 days incarceration and community service, or any combination of those penalties.
Let's talk briefly about Senate Bill 429 as well. It has a lot to do with accountability, a lot to do with the school councils, but one provision which the GAE, Georgia Education Association, strongly disagrees with is delaying implementing reduction of class size for a year. Explain that to us.
Well, you know, this is largely a budgetary matter, but it also fits very much aligns with the governor's emphasis on giving more flexibility to the local schools. by delaying for 1 year the implementation of the next phase of class size reductions, we're going to allow the schools to focus more on where the reductions need to be made. And let me just explain that if I can. The rule calls for, the law, the next phase calls for a site-by-site or school-by-school reduction in each and every single classroom of a certain number of students. What we have proposed is a 1-year suspension of the implementation of that, and instead requiring that the system-wide average per classroom be 28. But even then, in the law that we've passed through Senate Education, the individual classrooms cannot vary by more than 2 students. So even though we're looking at a system-wide average, each classroom can't have more than 2 above that level that's been set by state law. And what that does is it allows the school systems to focus more individually on the students that need that individual attention the most, meaning they can create smaller classrooms where students need more one-on-one instruction with the professor or the instructor, and they can allow for larger classrooms where that's not necessary.
The House Education Committee covered 2 of the governor's education bills during their meeting this afternoon. House Bill 1193 would revoke driver's licenses from unruly students. House Bill 1190 changes the administration of school councils and early intervention programs. It also changes the name of the Office of Educational Accountability to the Office of Student Achievement. Both bills were sent to subcommittee for further review.
In other news, the Georgia Watch Organization and the AARP urge legislators not to support tort reform. Lawmakers Chrissy Thrasher joins us live from the Capitol with more on that story. Chrissy.
Well, Gerald, today victims of medical malpractice, Georgia Watch and the Georgia AARP expressed their opposition to Senate Bill 432. They say the legislation promotes the special interests of the insurance and health care industries over patient safety. These people are here to speak out against Senate Bill 432. The bill would tie victims' salaries to the amount a jury can award for pain and suffering in cases of medical malpractice.
Thereby discriminating against low-wage earners as well as people who are out of work at the time, including children and senior citizens.
Like Jonathan Green, who lost his stay-at-home wife as a result of medical malpractice.
They wouldn't want to pay that as much to someone that didn't have a job or wasn't a member of the country club.
Georgia's nursing home residents would also be affected by these caps. The AARP says increasing quality control would lessen the amount of medical malpractice lawsuits.
I mean, that's where the emphasis should be, on improving quality. You're not going to have a lawsuit if there wasn't an injury to begin with.
While victims of medical malpractice, Georgia Watch and the AARP are against tort reform, doctors say the amount of medical malpractice lawsuits are not only increasing in drastic numbers.
Our malpractice has gone up 400% in the last 3 years.
But without tort reform, the future of some of Georgia's hospitals may be in jeopardy.
I mean, there is no question, and I'm not exaggerating, that there are going to be small emergency rooms in towns like Freeman or other towns in this state that are going to close in the next year or 2 if they do not get some type of tort reform and support.
And Senate Bill 432 is now in Senate Judiciary Committee for further review. Reporting live, I'm Chrissy Thrasher for Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, Chrissy.
The war of words over tort reform continued in the Senate today. Senator Charlie Tankley said that capping pain and suffering awards in malpractice cases was not the answer to rising malpractice insurance costs. Senator Tom Price said those caps are needed in any tort reform. First, Senator Tankley.
I'm perfectly willing to appear in front of the largest body that the Atlanta Medical Association, the Georgia Medical Association, and any county medical association can possibly convene to discuss these issues with them, explain to them what we've done, explain to them the rationale for what we've done, and how I am of absolute conviction that what I've proposed would do more in the long run for them than the cap that has been proposed and has become such a contentious issue here.
We're not talking about the amount of money that an individual would have made. We're not talking about the life expectancy. We're not talking about insurance costs. We're talking about non-economic damages. That's the pain and suffering. That's the multi-million-dollar awards that you hear about and read about.
2 tort reform bills remain in Senate Judiciary, a committee chaired by Senator Tankley. There may be efforts to get those bills reassigned.
And in other news, legislation that would place a time limit on filing writs of habeas corpus received a due-pass recommendation from the Senate Judiciary Committee today. A writ is a way to overturn a conviction after the appeals process has been exhausted. In felony cases, Senate Bill 337 would limit habeas corpus to 4 years. There would be no limit in death penalty cases. Senate Bill 337 now moves on to the full Senate.
The House passed a bill today that will maintain the utility company's power of eminent domain despite objections from citizens groups. Homeowners opposed to power line encroachment asked that legislators provide some government oversight through the Public Service Commission, but they had little luck. David Zelski is live at the Capitol with more. David.
Well, thanks, Nwandi. House Bill 373 passed by a vote of 154 to 15, but with the Senate substitute, which Hope says gutted the original bill that provided government oversight.
The language that's been used is very much in favor of the power industry. That's why what we're looking at right now is it's been 71 years since this language has been changed. Why the rush in the first 3 weeks of this session to get all of this through when we've been working on this for the last 10 years and they haven't done anything? We submit that the power industry has influenced the legislators to push this through at breakneck speed, and the citizens need to have this halted.
Representative John Noel argued to amend the substitute in favor of Hope's wishes, but House Majority Leader Jimmy Skipper later explains why the Oversight Committee cannot exist.
What's occurred is the due process and due protections of private property are not being adhered to. If you read this bill as it's come out, it says that on July 2004, July 1st, any condemnation procedure, any transmission line procedures, anything that have been forecast by Georgia Power into the future, and by the way, they project 10 and 20 years into the future, is instantly grandfathered. So the legislation that we would pass would only affect everything that is begun or even contemplated after that point. My proposal is to delete that provision, to not allow the grandfathering.
If this amendment were to pass, it makes the entire bill 373 unconstitutional because this amendment provides for the stay of proceedings that are already pending in court with respect to eminent domain.
Hope Chairman Mike Carter says the bill that passed today violates the Constitution and that they will take this issue to the federal courts. House Bill 373 now goes to the governor. Reporting live, I'm David Zelski for Lawmakers.
Thanks, David.
Heads of local school boards told a House Appropriations Subcommittee yesterday how their systems could be impacted by proposed budget cuts. Most Georgia school systems receive 54% of their funding from the state, with 40% generated locally and the remaining 6% from the federal government. Rural systems said the latest cuts would cause them to scale back already lean programs. Several metro Atlanta districts reported that serving high numbers of at-risk students make cuts hard to bear.
As different as Jenkins and Atlanta City might be, we have many similarities. While we are a high-wealth district by most definitions, we are also a high-need district. Fully 80% of our students come from families that qualify for free and reduced price lunch. The current funding formula, while allowing additional funds for high growth systems and also additional funding through an increased equalization for low wealth districts, doesn't provide any additional help for school systems like ours that are high need but high wealth.
The Department of Family and Children's Services told a House Health and Human Services Subcommittee this afternoon how it plans to maintain services while reducing its budget. Cuts include $200,000 from the Books for Babies program that allows books to be given to newborns only, over $400,000 to pay consultants, providing in-house professional development instead, and moving the daycare services from Metro-wide WCA to other programs. Additions mean $3 million to encourage adoption and almost $13 million to implement levels of care for foster children. Representative Mary Margaret Oliver questioned whether children are being assessed equally around the state.
That assessment does not replace the first placement, best placement assessment, but utilizes those results in order to determine the child's therapeutic needs.
Is the MSW a person, a DHR staff person, or is that an independent contracted person?
At this point, it's DHR staff.
And you have that available in the 159 counties?
The Stanford Place regionally, we currently have the full state covered. This service, the assessment is available for children in all residential placements across the state.
And the overlap, tell me again the overlap with first placement, best placement.
The first placement, best placement assessment looks at the child, the family, what type of placement they need, whether it feeds into the decision whether reunification is appropriate. It's a very broad-scale family assessment. The assessment for level of care is much more of an assessment of the child's therapeutic needs and determining which level of placement can most effectively meet the child's needs.
The House Health and Human Services Subcommittee will reconvene on Monday morning to address the Children's Indigent Defense Fund as well as DFACS. Now, the interim chairman of the Georgia Democratic Party, Bobby Kahn, has filed an ethics complaint against Governor Sonny Perdue. He says the governor has received excessive campaign contributions and misused state aircraft. He outlined his complaints at a press conference outside the Capitol today. Lawmakers Freeman was there. Jesse.
Well, thank you, Nwandi. As members of the press gathered to hear Bobby Kahn speak this afternoon, we were given this substantial handout. This packet includes nearly 50 pages of allegations and purported evidence of ethics violations by Governor Perdue.
I've got the ethics complaint here. Y'all have it, and I'm going to sign it now.
That's Bobby Kahn officially signing his complaint. In it, he alleges Perdue used state aircraft and telecommunications devices for political purposes, that he used state employees and equipment to promote political speeches, and that he accepted at least 12 campaign contributions in excess of the legal limit.
He blurred the line between politics and government, and he's blurred the line between government and personal business.
Now, Kahn also criticized Perdue for failing to fully disclose financial affairs and for what he calls stacking the Ethics Commission. Of course, that's the same Ethics Commission with which Kahn has filed his complaint. Purdue's press office did issue a response saying false partisan attacks cannot obscure the unprecedented level of integrity and transparency Governor Perdue has brought to state government. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Thank you, Jesse.
This morning, the Georgia chapter of the March of Dimes presented the state a $100,000 check to help fund newborn metabolic screening programs.
These funds have been raised through motorcyclists, about 2,000 a year, who come in for Ride for Georgia, the babies, and this is really a collaboration between the March of Dimes and the Georgia Department of Human Resources, and we're very pleased to be able to make this first presentation to you.
This check was the first of 4 installments from the March of Dimes, which in the end will total $1 million, all towards the health of Georgia's children.
Governor Perdue joined the National Federation of Small Business Owners at a luncheon this afternoon to talk about how they can have a voice in the legislative process, but also to honor recently retired NFIB Director Bert Fridlin for 22 years of helping small businesses in Georgia.
That's the power of the NFIB. Is a lot of people out across the state, a lot of members who have to labor, work, make payroll, workers' comp, and all those kind of issues on the rules and regulations that we impose upon our state, then that's where you can have the biggest impact. So if you want to do the best thing to honor Bert Fridlin today, let me tell you to get involved locally with your local legislators, and first of all, help to get the ones who know about small business issues elected, and then help to educate them about the issues that confront small business people across the state year in and year out.
The Senate voted today to give broadcasters some immunity when they put out information in the Levi's call. Senator David Schaefer explains.
It's a voluntary program by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the Georgia Emergency Management Agency, and the Georgia Association of Broadcasters to help recover abducted children who are in danger. Once the GPI verifies that a child has been abducted and is in danger, that information is transmitted to GEMA, which in turn transmits it to participating broadcasters. The program has been highly successful, both nationally and here in Georgia. As a result of litigation in another state, the Georgia Association of Broadcasters has come to us and asked us to consider legislation giving them limited immunity for their participation in this program.
Then Senate Bill 400 passed without opposition. It goes to the House.
The House Higher Education Committee today declined to vote on a proposal to remove Hope scholarships from students convicted of felony or alcohol and drug-related misdemeanors. If approved, House Bill 1116 would require students to pay for annual background checks and to report the results to the Georgia Student Finance Commission. Once convicted of one of these offenses, a student would never again be eligible for the scholarship. The bill was referred to subcommittee for further review.
Lieutenant Governor Mark Taylor spent part of his time yesterday talking to students at Georgia Tech and Georgia State University about Hope scholarship revisions. They discussed his plan as well as some of the other plans that have been proposed, including Governor Perdue's. David Zelski has that story.
The new version of the Hope scholarship would be terrible.
Lieutenant Governor Taylor urged students to make their voices heard, not only about the Hope Scholarship, but all issues that affect them and their university.
As students, I would hope that you'd stand up and say, look, I want to focus on the classroom. I want to focus on the laboratory. I want to focus from the Board of Regents and my leaders at Georgia Tech on class sizes.
I think everyone appreciates the fact that the Lieutenant Governor came out and explained some of his views about the Hope Scholarship today, but it confirmed what a lot of students at Georgia Tech are thinking, that the primary issue here is our budgets and what's happening to the university system funding.
I think the students are looking at their options. I think they're getting engaged in the debate, and that's what I'm trying to encourage by asking them to contact their House and Senate members and contact Governor Perdue about their vision for the future of the Hope Scholarship program, because it's going to change for the worse if they don't get engaged immediately.
Lieutenant Governor Taylor stands by his plan to freeze tuition hikes for 3 years, creating a statewide uniform grading system, and also believes Hope should be reevaluated every year. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm David Zelski.
In the House chamber yesterday, there was a memorial service for longtime legislator Ralph Twiggs. The state representative from Hiawassee passed away in September following a long illness.
Ralph Twiggs was truly a servant leader in every sense of that phrase. As a quiet Christian man, he knew and lived a life of true service, walking in faith with his Lord.
He was a great American, he was a great Georgian, and he was my friend. And I know now he's walking around those valleys up in heaven, looking at the lakes and the trees up there like he did in the mountains he loved so much.
Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art.
And coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, a resolution that would amend Georgia's Constitution to outlaw gay marriage is expected to be in the Senate tomorrow. Also in the Senate, the funding formula for Georgia's transportation dollars. We'll have those stories and more tomorrow night on Lawmakers. Now stay tuned for Ask This Old House. That program is next here on Georgia Public Broadcasting.
And that is our broadcast for this, the 8th legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. Thanks for joining us. I'm Wandy Lawson.
I'm Gerald Bryant. Good night, everybody.